Hey everybody, nobody here. I want to be a robot. It seems like every Titan I run across these days has two candles stuck to the sides of their head. So, I want to give some love to Lorelei Splendour's overlooked little sis, Hoarfrost Z. Just give me a moment here while I get my chassis set up. This isn't supposed to be the new meta or blow anyone's mind, it's just supposed to be a good time. And I'm a bit of a contrarian, and even more so, I want to be a robot. What does being a robot mean? It means I have to use stasis, since Hoarfrost's whole gimmick is turning your barricade into a glacier. And, if that's the case, I'm building into splatting those stasis crystals everywhere. This makes a few of my choices easy. In fact, the easiest decision is Glacier Nade. That means I have two abilities that make crystals. Since I'll be making those crystals, Tectonic Harvest is a shoe-in aspect. It's got two slots. In those slots, I'm using Whisperer's Shards. It makes shatter and give your grenade back faster so you can make even more crystals. And I'm using Whisperer Fissures, which makes your crystals burst larger and harder. Since we're focusing on crystals, Agar Scepter and Cryesthesia are not the go-to options despite their stasis synergy. Speaking of synergy, we still have one open aspect. If you're using a weapon that breaks crystals easily, like pulses, machine guns, wave grenade launchers, bows that have explosive head, 140 or less hand cannons, hack and breach armaments, even your fist, or if you're using Whisper of Rending, which makes your kinetic primaries pop crystals more easily, then you should use Howl of the Storm. Having the ability to make crystals with every one of our abilities is killer. Otherwise, you do have the option of using Cryoclasm instead to slide into crystals to shatter them. This frees up your weapons, but it loses you a fragment slot and means that you're stuck with Shiver Strike as your only melee option. It also requires you to be on top of your crystals, so it doesn't always work well in higher difficulty activities. Additionally, your fragment slots are already pretty tight. Whisper of Conduction feels almost necessary since it draws shards in after you break the crystals. Then, your choice becomes between Rhyme for shields or Chains for resistance. In my opinion, Rhyme seems more reliable. You essentially gain health whenever a crystal shatters. Either way, Cryoclasm works just fine, and it's a good time, but Howl is undoubtedly better for what we're trying to accomplish here. We want the field to look like we're in our super, but all the time. Because I'm a robot. And robots are super cool. So we're splatting crystals down everywhere. Why bother? Here's how the engine works. Tectonic Harvest causes any crystal you shatter to make shards that recover melee energy when you pick them up. This is nice on its own since we're going to be using the aspect Howl of the Storm, but we're also going to be using a mod that takes this to the next level, Elemental Shards. Elemental Shards makes every one of those little shards that we pick up count as a stasis elemental well, which opens up our combat mod options. Since every ability we have makes crystals, which then makes shards, you'll essentially have on-demand uptime from whatever you do here. One important note, freezing enemies doesn't make shards, that's a Warlock thing. We are a robot Titan, and we like popsicles. As a result, the engine scales well into harder activities, thanks to the fact that enemies are completely optional. No kills, no crits, not even hits needed. You can literally sit in the Enclave firing range and just spread Christmas. This also means that Font of Might is amazing for damage phases, because as soon as the damage phase starts, pop an ability, punch a crystal, boom, extra damage. This is actually very similar to a current meta in-game strategy, in which you use Supreme Wellmaker to pop a super in order to get a Stasis Elemental Well. Between Elemental Shards and Font of Might, you'll still have 3 open slots in order to do whatever you want. In my case, I prefer using Elemental Charge to set up a hybrid build using stasis weapons in both kinetic and heavy slots. Your abilities will be on a fairly short cooldown, so the options are very open. That said, the stasis specific well mods aren't anything too special for this build. Most of them are for ability regen, and we already have that inherently. I did give time dilation a try, but it didn't really come up very often since our abilities just refresh whatever we have going anyway. In other words, I'm not the time traveling kind of robot. Let's talk weapons. I mentioned earlier that certain weapon types are better at working with the stasis crystals. Here's where I'll drop some names. For primaries, I would keep an eye out for Ias Luna, Syncopation, New Purpose, and Peacebond. Keep a special eye out for the headstone rolls on all of those. The new World Drop Bow, Lunalata 4B, can also roll headstone, but headstone is in the same slot as explosive head, so you would have to either use Cryoclasm or Whisper of Rending. Crate has a similar issue in that without rending, it takes too much time and ammo to pop the crystals, but it does play very well with Font of Might. I'd like to get an extra shout out to Syncopation. It breaks crystals in 2 bursts, and it can be crafted with headstone at level 1, making it extremely accessible, and it's a good weapon in its own right. Peacebond is probably the most reliable way if you're trying to use headstone to make crystals. Unfortunately, it comes from Iron Banner, which means that focusing it is expensive and time limited. For special weapons, you'll probably want to keep an eye out for wave-frame grenade launchers, such as Explosive Personality, Forbearance, or even a Deafening Whisper if you have one. These are nice because you don't really have to aim in particular. Just shoot the ground in front of a crystal and the wave will blow up whatever crystals it passes through. Shotguns are also nice, but they do kind of require you to be point blank. Snipers are a bit harder to recommend because you have to aim, but there is Thoughtless, which is great if you want a stasis special weapon. Since you want to be using Font of Might most of the time, if not all of the time, then Stasis Heavies are definitely the way to go. The Recurrent Impact Machine Gun, Palmyra B Rocket Launcher, and Bump in the Night Rocket Launcher are all craftable, great options. If you're one of the crazies who actually goes into trials, then Reed's Regret is the most meta choice. Personally, in the new Dungeon Duality, I run Recurrent for the Headstone for the Vault, and either of the Rockets for the bosses. It's good stuff, especially since you can activate Font of Might on demand. As far as exotic weapons go, your choices are actually very open. My preference is actually Dead Messenger. Not only will it do elemental switching so that you can meet match game requirements, it's also very good at popping all of the crystals from any of your abilities in one shot. If we ever get any more anti-champion mods for snipers, then Borealis would be able to do something similar. And of course, if you're memeing, you could always bring out Salvation's Grip. Don't do that. Speaking of things not to do, don't bother with the super, it's not that great. Although if you do use it, back up a little bit and use the heavy attack in order to spawn crystals right on the boss so that whoever else is attacking it breaks those crystals when they shoot it. That seems to be the less disruptive option if you're going to be doing this during a damage phase. Since we don't really care about the super, then you're pretty free to run Special Finisher if you like. It's a great way to apologize to all the randoms that you'll play with and you put a crystal right in front of them as they shoot a rocket. You can't expect a robot to get everything right all the time, can you? That about covers things. For the combat demo, I'm using Elemental Charge to become charged with light, and I'm also wearing Reactive Pulse and Powerful Friends. Those are really just to activate the secondary bonuses where I get a stat boost and the Overshield finisher. You'll see that my big DPS combo is to throw a grenade down, punch a crystal, and then start shooting rockets. It's actually really easy to get used to. Again, this wasn't really supposed to be a end-game destroy everything by looking at it build. It's more just to have a good time. Thanks for your time and see you around.